I got sent a request relating to defensive boxing. The request said, can you do a video on different boxing styles? Billy Cell, peekaboo, conventional, and the best boxers to use each style. I mean, what I'm taking from that is, there's not necessarily like a specific question there, it's just an interest in maybe hearing a general overview and a general discussion of defence within boxing, defensive techniques, defensive varieties, etc. So let me talk about that. First and foremost, I believe that defence in boxing cannot simply be summed up by one attribute, by one technique, and that the ultimate defensive fighter will have a number of different facets to their game and facets to their defence that make them truly elite. So let me talk about a few, and I'll go into more specifics later on in the video, but let me talk about a few general factors that make a fighter defensively elite in my mind. Firstly, I want to talk about movement and foot speed. Yeah, put simply, a fighter who cannot be there when an opponent throws his punch is ahead of the vast majority of the field. Now, a guy like Erislandy Lara, he isn't maybe the most stylistically entertaining fighter to watch for the casual fan because he's too mobile, because he doesn't engage, because he runs. But let me say, that is a very good contributor first to a defensive fighter. It's not impossible, but it's rarer to find a defensive fighter, an elite defensive fighter, who isn't a good mover. Because being very simple and straightforward about it, if you can put some distance between yourself and your opponent when you need to, you're already one step ahead of the competition. Obviously, related to movement is foot speed. You know, you want to be one of these guys who can adjust quickly. You know, get out of there ASAP. You don't want to be someone who's slow, who's plodding, etc. So I think that comes into one. Now, another thing, not to be overly basic, is the jab. You know, if you can be boxing on your back foot, moving away from an opponent, and shooting a really stiff, powerful jab that helps to keep your opponent out of range, to stop your opponent from setting their feet, to stop your opponent from getting on the inside. Again, even though you're doing classic boxing here rather than, you know, the more defensively elite stuff like rolling and angles and that sort of thing, once again, you are ahead of the vast majority of the competition. You know, if you're trying to hit someone and they're moving away from you at speed, moving laterally and throwing a really, really aggressive jab, not a jab that's necessarily going to take your head off, but a jab that you want to avoid, a jab that is kind of stopping you from setting your feet, then that guy, I'd say, is ahead of 80-90% of pro boxers out there. Let's talk about additional things in addition to movement, in addition to jab, in addition to foot speed. Head movement, you know, absolutely vital, and sometimes that's the difference between a fighter making it and not. I mean, recently we saw Adam Etches versus Sergei Kamitsky, and Adam Etches, who was undefeated, who was a well-heralded prospect, you know, got knocked out cold. He didn't have any head movement. You know, when you step up to the semi-elite levels of the game, it's absolutely key. I mean, having a tight guard, being able to, you know, keep your hands high, obviously is key as well. Clinching, you know, a fighter like Vladimir Klitschko, again, it's something that people criticise, something that people find ugly, but the ability to clinch, the ability to, you know, tie an opponent up, to stop them from doing their work where they want to do it, is pretty key. Now, people criticise the Vladimir Povetkin fight. They say it's an ugly matchup. They say it's bad for the sport. And it's hard not to disagree with that on one level. But what I would say is Vladimir was a taller man. He was up against a rough, tough opponent who wanted to get inside and work his body. And through clinching, Vladimir was able to take away Povetkin's game. So a defensively elite fighter is going to be able to tie his opponent up on the inside. Reflexes, also key. The ability to sort of hit and not get hit. The ability to sort of see, sense a punch coming, duck out of the way, you know, make your opponent miss. Vital. Vital. Let's talk angles. The ability to bend at the waist, to dip, to go low, to dip with the knees, to lean back, to take away shots by leaning. These are all elements that, for me, tie in to being complete package defensively. Finally, that when you get to a real high level, I watched a little clip recently about the Mayweather-Mosley fight, and some of the techniques used, you know, how on the inside the elbow comes up, you know, just like you're guarding. It's not an elbow, but you know, you're putting this part of your body in front of the opponent. You know, it makes them really uncomfortable and hard. You know, when your opponent rushes in, you know, changing your guard from like this to like this, so your forearm comes out and positions itself uncomfortably against your opponent. And it's just having those angles, you know, being able to twist at the waist and, you know, adjust your guard so that the elbow's out, or being able to twist and, you know, as you do it, kind of not strike your opponent with the forearm so you get disqualified, but to have it there so it's bothering your opponent so that it's uncomfortable. For me, all these things are essential tricks, essential capabilities to have for the truly elite defensive fighter. Now, obviously I'm asking a lot there. There's not too many fighters out there who can, you know, move like Usain Bolt, jab like Vladimir Klitschko, have head movement like Mike Tyson, clinch like Klitschko, you know, have reflexes like Roy Jones Jr., being able to use your elbows and forearms like Mayweather, have angles like Hopkins, be able to bend and dip and lean like James Toney. You know, I'm not expecting a fighter to have all of those capabilities, but for someone to be the ultimate package, it'd be somebody who could, you know, really bring that all to the table. I mean, picture this. Let's go heavyweights. Let's say you're fighting Derek Chisora. Now let's say Derek Chisora is the come forward fighter. Now first things first, if you're able to move and back away from him on your back foot so that he's unable to close down the range and unable to unload, you know, his hooks and wild combinations, then as you're doing that, you're able to jab, you're able to keep him outside, you're able to score points, you're able to keep him honest, you're making him consider his defensive rather than just a throwing. Then as he's coming in and throwing, you know, huge overhand rights and huge combinations of hooks, you're leaning backwards to take the sting out of the shots, your head is moving, you know, your guard is up, you're bending. You know, as he tries to tie you up, you can kind of clinch him so that he's unable to throw and judge the angles right. Yeah, if you're able to do that, you're one step ahead of the competition. And I think you're well on the way to being an elite defensive fighter. So those are all the attributes that I'd say you need to be. I'm going to have to do this video in 2 parts because it's going on for a little bit. Next up, I'll talk about specific types of defence and specific fighters. Thanks for watching.